Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
Hello and welcome back to Talos Talks Shit. I'm your host Massimo Meneghetti, and we have a bit of a different episode in store for you guys today. We've been talking about computer consciousness, AI, artificial intelligence, how computers learned how to learn, all sorts of fancy things like that. And at the end of the last episode, we sort of had a bit of a palate cleanser, where Pubby and I just talked some shit. So this week, Pubby is unfortunately not joining me. He is going to see his lovely lady in Thailand, and we wish him all the best for that. But I do have a very new, very interesting guest with me today. I have Mr. Sean Devonport, co-founder of ImmersiveDSP, a company that specializes in virtual surround sound or 360 surround sound. Mr. Sean,
simply.
Hey, dude. Why don't you introduce yourself? We are actually very good friends. So, Sean, what is your... just introduce yourself, man. Tell people what you do.
How's it to all the Talos listeners? Being myself, I'm also one of those.
That's good. That's good. We need the support.
Yeah. No, it's been fantastic. I really have enjoyed those podcasts, so please keep it up. I'm sad Pubby's not in the studio with us today. But yeah, hopefully we can make up for that. I'm Sean Devonport. I've known Massimo for many years now. I think we go back since we were 8 or something, maybe a bit
way too long back, dude. Decades. We've known
lifetimes.
Each other. We didn't necessarily always like each other. I remember there was a point where we were pretty antagonistic, but then through skateboarding and music, I guess we kind of found each other's vibes, you know?
No, exactly. I think music's the one there as well. I think through gigging together and doing all these sorts of technical things, it's been super good. That's how we've made that relationship.
Yeah, okay, so let's actually just give the listeners a bit of a background here. So we were both studying at Rhodes University back in 2012. We're both doing humanities degrees, and neither of us really liked them. So I ended up dropping out of Rhodes and leaving Grahamstown. I went to go pursue my passion in sound, which I'm very happy for. That was a good choice. But Sean, instead of dropping out, you started pursuing a comp-sci degree, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So fortunately at Rhodes, I was able to do a BA General degree. So I think it was like English, musicology, which is like just straight music theory and stuff, and history, like classic music. And then sound technology as well. And we were in that class together. And then maths, which was quite an interesting thing to throw into a arts degree at that stage, I think. But yeah, I think after that first year, I sort of realized that, English wasn't ready for me and these sorts of things weren't ready for me, and I wanted to just focus. Well, actually, it was at that point that we kind of got into psytrance and electronic music production.
Yeah, so this is quite important. We sort of, all of a sudden, we got into the DJ scene, the club scene.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. Late nights.
Late mornings.
Graveyard shifts.
Yeah, man. Yeah. 2 to 4, we held it down.
Yeah, dude. Slamming LCD influence. Yeah.
Yeah, so
hello.
that kind of turned us onto, I don't know, just
it's music technology.
the
I think.
idea of doing shit on your PC, man. I don't know,
making music and sound on your PC. I mean, me at that stage, I started to realize I was always into guitar, and I played in like the Junior Philharmonic Orchestra when we were younger. When Massimo played trumpet, I played French horn. And then that's sort of what we did for a while. I got sick of the orchestra, and I think so did Massimo. and then I went and started pursuing guitar and that sort of thing. I started falling in love with Jimi Hendrix and technology at that point already, like guitar effects, pedals, and all this stuff. And then when we got to Rhodes and started getting to this DJ scene and everything, it sort of started taking off from there in terms of the digital audio side of things. And I just started learning all about how you could use a digital audio workstation to make music, and we started making psytrance music and getting really into it. And
not very good psytrance music.
I wasn't bad. Like, we played a couple of threw some sounds down.
Yeah,
Negative
that's
Pizza.
true, but you're not going to hear it on any major compilations.
No, we got some good friends that are doing that though. Shouts out to Leo Mias and Tim Hooper and all those guys from the Zulu Tunes team.
Yeah,
they're holding it down. Anyways, at that stage, after my BA General degree, I said, screw it, I'm going to start following a more scientific degree, start figuring out how do we use these sorts of plugins to generate sounds and try to get it from the ground up. How could I do that? How could I write software that would allow for that to happen? Still very much into music at that stage, and then we started doing other sort of DJ gigs, touring with a bunch of different people like Dubwagon. That was some good times.
I am.
I think when I got to honors, I think it was only at that stage did I start really finding myself in this realm of immersive audio. I've always been interested in spatial sound and sounds in general, so it was sort of a natural, leading on to that. But I just got given this really great opportunity at the beginning of my honors degree to start working on a spatial audio sound system being developed right here in South Africa, with South African needs and South African wants. Mostly being
So basically you started developing proprietary technology for a company called ImmersiveDSP.
Yes.
Correct. Or it started at MiniDSP.
Well, interesting collaboration between my then supervisor and MiniDSP in Hong Kong. So at that stage, the CEO of MiniDSP was 100% on board of ImmersiveDSP, and they were co-partners essentially. And the product was building and things were happening and all this stuff. And then essentially what MiniDSP did is they provided the hardware, whilst ImmersiveDSP provided the software, which was my supervisor at that stage, Richard Foss. I hope he listens to them.
Shout out Richard Foss.
Yeah, no, definitely. He's been a real pleasure to work with, and he guides me a lot in a lot of things that I do, so it's really good. But at that stage, I got given this opportunity to start working on some more algorithms. They really liked that I did my maths degree. I had a maths. I was doing maths honors, and I had a maths third year degree, so they were really interested in that. Well, Richard was, and I started getting into more of algorithm design and understanding these different concepts of immersive DSP and spatial audio rendering, and how you do that physically and technologically.
So we got to break this down a little bit, because there is a hardware side and there's a software side.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
The listeners don't know right now, but I'm sitting looking at you in a giant dome full of speakers. That is definitely a later stage in the development.
Yes, very much so.
But basically you started off by developing software.
Yes,
to allow for the distribution of audio through these speakers.
Yes,
correct?
Exactly. So at that stage, MiniDSP, we have these speakers that we're using now that Massimo refers to. Those are Ethernet AVB speakers, and using those speakers, we were able to send massively multi-channel audio streams out to all these different speakers. The interesting thing with our system, and at that stage it was like this, is that all the processing power gets distributed to the endpoint speaker. So for these massive multi-channel sort of loudspeaker arrays that you might imagine, even at a festival or something like that, where you just got all these speakers, the way that they can distribute audio without latency and all synchronized is through an audio network of sorts. There's a variety of things that can do that, a variety of protocols. But in any case, I started developing the software that would allow for further rendering algorithms to be implemented within the system, which, and it still is called Emergo. So essentially, at the start of my honors, I was essentially given this framework of Emergo, which interfaces with a hardware and a software side. And I was tasked to extend the software to allow for further rendering algorithms.
And also to fix it up a little bit and polish it up and make it a bit more stable. I think you've been pretty key in the stabilization of this stuff, from what I know from chatting to you for the last couple of years.
Yeah, we've definitely been pushing. I personally feel like that's the best way that software can get into people's hands, and it's such an interesting piece of software, or system in itself. Like, it's hard to, you want to make that barrier to entry as little as possible. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so that's something we're going to get into in our later episodes. We got a nice 4-part series with Sean here.
Looking forward to it.
So we got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. But let's actually start by just breaking down sound and sound imaging. So from the first recordings till about the 1960s, sound only came out the speakers in one direction. It was called mono. And that means everything just came straight out the middle. You didn't really have anything on the left, anything on the right. It was all just one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to say, because it's not really the middle. It just came out of one speaker, even, because the middle implies there's a left and a right, or like a, you know what I'm saying?
Good point. Yeah. So it just basically, it was
one signal to one speaker. Like,
one signal to one speaker. And then in the 60s, they got all trippy and were like, whoa, man, maybe we can make things go like left and right and stuff. And they developed stereo, which is what most of us use now. You know, your headphones are stereo, your car's stereo, your stereo at home is stereo, and basically, stereo hi-fi. And basically all that means is that the audio can either go out of a left speaker or a right.
And then you're able to balance them with a pot. And the pot meaning potentiometer. Developed by Alan Blumlein, if I'm not mistaken, at Bell Labs. If you guys are really interested in stuff, check out Bell Labs. These guys have been pushing audio development in general, I think.
So, pots and potentiometers. When Sean says balance, it means how much energy your right ear and your left ear is going to receive from the speaker, correct?
Yes.
And the idea is to make that equal in some places so that something sounds balanced and clear, but then also unequal in some places. So you can have cool Jimi Hendrix solos going left to right, you know?
Yeah, off-centering.
Off-centering, exactly. And that was a pretty huge development for audio.
Yeah.
And then funnily enough, they went pretty fast in the 60s, and they also developed this thing called quadraphonic, which never really took off. Instead of 2 speakers, it was 4 speakers, 2 in front of you, 2 behind you. And the balance then became sort of more surround, more immersive. And
I think they did that for Fantasia. That was the first time. It was I think it was Dolby even or something. But anyway, I think it was like Warner. They pioneered that. They contracted that to happen apparently.
Yeah, and you needed all sorts of special equipment, and it was expensive, and
it was hard.
It was hard, so it never really took off.
Lots of cables.
Lots of cables.
And you can't put it on a vinyl. At that stage, they hadn't.
Well, I've actually got a Miles Davies Bitches Brew in quadraphonic.
No ways.
Yeah,
I have to hear that. That is amazing.
Well, I don't know how to set it. Well, maybe we can set it up with your rig in quadraphonic.
Yeah, I think we could actually. We probably need a special needle that reads quadraphonic though, or something.
That's true.
I wonder how.
We'll do some research on that and try create a.
Yeah, we'll try play it back to the listeners.
yeah. Because just a quick aside, which we'll get into later. But the really cool thing about what Sean's doing is that he can take all of this surround sound and make it play back through your headphones. So that's something cool we're going to get into a little bit more later. But so basically, just to continue the history of sound, then movies sort of started making a lot more money, taking more center stage, basically. And they weren't really happy. They weren't happy with the stereo setup, mostly because people at the back of the audience couldn't really hear what was going on. So they tried to develop various forms of surround sound, as we know it. You buy a hi-fi from Dion and it says surround sound. that's kind of what they started. So basically it started with a 2.1 configuration, which means 2 stereo speakers and 1 subwoofer. They realized that wasn't sufficient, so they went to a 5.1, which is 2 speakers at the front for left and right, then 2 speakers at the back. Initially, the idea was to just boost the sound for the listeners, but they started to get more creative with that. And then 1 speaker in the middle at the front for dialogue.
Yeah.
So hyper-directional.
Very clear. Yeah.
Yeah. And then a subwoofer. And then that later developed into 7.1 and finally Dolby Atmos, which is currently the most surround sound you can find in a movie theater.
Yeah, so it's interesting, like Dolby Atmos itself they do have something of a surround sound format, which they call channel beds in their format. But they also introduced this other thing called object-based audio. And that I think is a key difference between Atmos and other typical channel-based formats. And I think is something that I'd like to chat about.
Well, yeah, so basically object-based audio is the idea that instead of only being able to send something left speaker, right speaker, back speakers, or whatever.
And as an engineer, you have to mix that in the studio.
Yeah, you mix that. Everyone mixes that in post-production studio, and it's like I said, it started with the idea to just allow the audience at the back of the theater better audio, but it evolved with creative cinema, where they started to put things coming from behind you and things moving around you.
Well, they could always do that with surround, you know.
No. This is what I'm saying. So this is how 5.1. Sort of evolved, you know?
Yeah.
They instead of just amplifying the sound at the back, they started panning sound to the back.
Yeah. Actual objects.
And trying to make things sound like they were coming around you, aka surround sound. And then with Dolby Atmos, they allowed people to create audio objects, which were way more speakers than 5.1 or 7.1. Do you know how many speakers in a Dolby Atmos setup?
I think there's like 100 there's like more than 100 if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there's 100 point sources, but I think there's fucking...
In a cinema setup.
There's more speakers. Yeah, there's way more speakers than 7.1. And the idea is that they were able to start moving things above you and... you know, making things move more organically than just one speaker to the next, right?
And this object-based audio brought about a very intrinsic thing in the production side of things, because while channel-based audio, as an engineer, and if there are any engineers listening here, sound engineers, you know that when you pan your sounds like left and right, you have to mix it to those channels, and then you bounce down to stereo. The interesting thing with object-based audio is that now you have this object, and associated with that object's metadata and a mono track. So instead of you as the engineer now having to mix your channels, and you can do that with objects in the pre-production stage or the production stage, the interesting thing is that now instead of distributing just a channel bed of like 5.1 channels, you distribute actual objects with the metadata and the mono channels. So now the cinema can essentially take this metadata and audio channels, or just mono channels, and render them to the loudspeakers for whatever loudspeaker array that you'd like. And that's quite a key difference in surround sound, because at that point, surround sound, you could only mix for a certain arrangement. Now we can mix just using a spatial abstraction of space, of objects in space, and just have them play back as the engineer designed them.
So what that means for the layman here is that the engineer gets a very fancy joystick, and he gets to move around sounds as if it were moving a ball around the physical environment to sort of place them for the listener.
Without any knowledge of where the speakers might be or anything.
Yeah, which is really cool. You can go check out Dolby Atmos in your Scene Extreme cinemas in South Africa. I'm sure it's much more popular overseas.
Yeah, and the Joker's out on there, I think.
Yep, Joker's there at the moment. There's a super cool World War I movie coming out there soon.
Mm-hmm.
I know Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk was sort of a real testament to the power of Dolby Atmos.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you're interested to know what Dolby Atmos sounds like and feels like, go watch a movie.
Yeah, and you don't have to pay the exorbitant amount of money to buy the receiver, so you can watch it at home. Exactly. So, and many
this
speakers.
is later tech we're going to get into. So, essentially, what we wanted to leave you with on this episode is that up until now, sound has been fairly constrained by technological limitations. And even though Dolby Atmos is pretty amazing, there is a very definite next step. And that next step is immersive audio.
Yes, yeah.
And how that next step is happening and what exactly that next step is what we're going to dive into in our next episode.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Blended Podcasts, for allowing us to host this. Thank you, Sean, for taking the time to
Of course.
to do this.
My pleasure.
And yeah, we'll hope you tune in for episode 18.
Bye.
Cheers.